Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. Today is one of our most fortunate days on Conversations on the Coast because we are going to be talking with Sir Harold Evans about a marvelous book. Don't call it a coffee table book, please, even though it's big and weighs a lot. The title of the book, and remember the full title, They Made America, From the Steam Engine to the Search Engine. 2 Centuries of Innovators. The publisher is Little Brown and Company, and thanks for coming by.
A great pleasure, Jim.
You know, PW greeted your book rather nicely, said in part, Evans's profusely illustrated and elegantly written book offers the same breadth and scope as his previous bestseller, The American Century. Just as Edison was inspired by popular biographies of innovators before him, so might the next generation of scientific and commercial explorers find guidance in Evans's exciting survey. And, you know, one would hope that is the case because, as you write in your first part of the book, in the introduction, you say that intensifying competition from around the world requires Americans to innovate as briskly as did those first adventurers.
Exactly right. And what I'm slightly frightened of is that we're not doing that. The pace of innovation may be slackening, and it's the next generation that holds the key. And it's amazing to me, Jim, that this is the first book that's put together the story of innovators of enterprise over 200 years. So you can't understand American history, never alone be inspired to create something new, unless you listen to and hear and read the stories of these amazing people who went through such dramatic lives and gave us so many things, everything from the steam engine to the search engine, as you said.
Well, that's an interesting point. What you're saying is that this class of people, so much responsible for, if you will, the success of America, have never really been focused on before.
No. We've had lots of biographers of presidents. We've had politics, and it comes out of our nostrils.
Yes.
And yet all the political promises, frankly, don't add up to a lot unless there's somebody there to deliver the wheat, the goods, the roads, and so on. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness depends on Cyrus McCormick inventing the reaper, the steamboat, the railway. And yet the people who made good the political promises have been so neglected. It's an amazing thing, because America is supposed to venerate business, and actually what it does is neglect the people, the real heroes. Of course, we know we've had business scandals, which turns us all off, but I'm talking about the creators, Jim, here.
Well, let's talk about them. Let's try to describe them. Let's try to understand what kind of person is an innovator. You give us hints, and I don't think you give us a stand-up kind of definition, which is great. At one point, you say innovators are those kind of people who have an unwavering faith in their ideas and themselves.
Innovators all face failure. The story of 200 years of innovation is of men and women failing and failing and failing again and getting up off the floor with a different angle on it, or persistence, and finally breaking. In fact, Edison said many innovators give up when they're on the point of success. So the perseverance and that ability to go the last mile, sometimes dependent, women for a long time were held back by not being able to get capital, and women were held back from business because it was thought to be kind of vulgar to be in business.
Yeah.
So I know those limitations.
Well, the other thing that they do with respect to business is they're the guys who apply inventions and ideas in a way that makes society leap ahead, so that society is going to benefit from something.
Exactly. Just thinking, you turn on the light today. Do you ever give a thought about Edison, who made the bulb? Never mind that. About Edison, who connected the electricity together, and so on and so on. You cannot get through an hour of your life, wherever you are in the United States, wherever you are in the world, without drawing on a benefit bequeathed to us by a man or a woman who went through tremendous struggles and very exciting and romantic lives too.
And then you call them, and this is a new word to me, they are democratizers, for they bring the fruits of invention to the masses. And this has an irony.
Well, it sounds kind of romantic, but there's a lot of truth in it. If you think about Henry Ford, for instance, until he came along, cars were for the rich. There's another example, Giannini, which I'd like to talk about. And then you've got One Trip, who gives us international jet travel. They're bringing things to the masses that were, first of all, the privilege of the rich. So they're democratizers in that very true sense.
Let's just lay out for the folks listening the makeup of the book. There are 70 innovators profiled, if you will, in the book, plus 100 more listed in an innovators gallery at the end of the book.
That's right, 70 full-scale profiles and 100 done briefly.
Okay, and there are three parts: the early days of the Republic, Civil War to 1903, I think, and then the 60s to the present. This is a wonderful book, and one of the great pleasures of reading it is that it introduces you to people you never heard of, but who are part of your daily life. We'll meet one of them when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast, and the book we're talking about today is called They Made America. From the steam engine to the search engine. 2 Centuries of Innovators. We're talking with the author, Harold Evans, and a gentleman by the name of Michael Litton, who has a little job, chairman and CEO of Sony Pictures, has read this book and says in part, Harold Evans has combined his skill as a great journalist and historian to write a wonderful book on American entrepreneurs and their achievements. This is an unusual and extremely valuable book in that it tells the history of the United States from the perspective of business and commerce rather than politics and culture. And as you were commenting before, this hasn't been done previously to any extent.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah. This book, he goes on, is highly original, and its narrative explores many of the core aspects of this country that make it unique in its constant ability to adapt and reinvent itself. I found it absolutely fascinating, he says.
Well, he's a great fellow.
He's your new best friend.
Well, I'll make him one.
But what he says there is true. I mean, if we look at this country with pride as citizens of it and say that, we're resilient, we can come back, we can, quote, turn things around, take things to the next level, what we're really talking about is that we're blessed with innovators, because those are the ones who actually do it. They're the engine that makes that kind of resilience possible.
Yeah, and we're all, in San Francisco here, you had a young guy running around the streets as a rebel, and people would have thought, what good is he to civilization? In fact, he went into his lab and he invented the gene, spliced a gene, and we get artificial insulin from him, Herbert Boyer, and we get the whole biotech thing, and America leads the world in biotechnology. There are 1,500 biotech companies here in the streets of San Francisco, an innovator running around. How many people ever think, well, thank God for him?
I have a problem with your book. Your problem with your book is it's too captivatingly written.
Thank you.
I mean, one starts poking around in it because it is so big and there are so many profiles. Well, I'll just skim this. I'll just blah, 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 and then you get captured. And one of the stories that absolutely captured me is this fellow Samuel Insull. And I started, and I couldn't stop. He comes here from England at the age of 21 in February of 1881, and he's met at the dockside by Edison's chief engineer, a fellow by the name of Thomas Johnson. And when the first impression that Edison has of him is something like, I think I made a mistake bringing this fellow over.
I did. Well, don't forget, it's very hard, Jim, for them to understand you. First of all, Insull speaks like this. Hello, my name's Samuel Insull. I come over on the boat from England. I was very seasick on the way. I mean, he spoke Cockney. And here he's speaking to a half-deaf Midwesterner. And yet this was a meeting of
Communication ain't happening.
Of course, by the next morning, Insull has found money from looking at contracts in detail, and he goes along, not having slept, and they buy a warehouse, which is the foundation of the General Electric Corporation, where they're going to make dynamos. And then Samuel Insull goes to Chicago, which is about 10 years later, and takes over a tiny power station. Now, you have to understand this. You were talking about democratization, Jim. Electricity was for the rich. An isolated power station serving a restaurant, a hotel, or J.P. Morgan. Right, wonderful. Except that that's not what electricity should be. So Insull has this brilliant perception. Make electricity fantastically in the mass. If you don't consume it, it's dead. It's a curious thing about electricity.
Yeah.
So how can you sell it? Well, give it away. What do you mean, give it away? Okay, but we'll give it away to those who would be encouraged to use it, and we'll charge a lot for those who must have it, like the streetcar companies, peak and off-peak demand. A consequence of Insull is for years and years, electricity prices fall.
Yeah. The whole rate system is his creation.
His creation, and he electrified America because he got control of Midwest utilities. Then he was brought down in a terrible, tragic scene because in the Great Depression he came to the rescue of Chicago. He paid for the police, the forces, the teachers. He sustained the opera, did wonderful things. But he'd aroused enmity in Wall Street because he raised money through bonds instead of through Wall Street. So they lost their commissions. They hated him. And the press was horrible to him because he was seen as a kind of dictator, etc., etc. And so they pursued him. And he had to flee the country because he knew he was going to be framed. And they chased him all over the Mediterranean, brought him back to stand trial. And it's a marvellous moment, because he tells his story and the jury acquits him, bang, like that.
Yeah, just boom, like that, yeah. And I almost cheered because, I mean, he was such a good guy.
A tremendous guy.
He saved Chicago during the Depression.
He did.
He paid teachers' salaries.
Exactly right.
And so forth and so on. And, helped out all kinds of people. And then they put him on trial. And
the good sense of the people save him.
Yeah. Well, here in San Francisco, we don't need to go far to find the work of a great innovator. His legacy is all around us. Some people say on every street corner. He's A.P. Giannini, founder of Bank of America. More about him next.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Today is Sir Harold Evans Day on Conversations on the Coast. He's here to talk about They Made America, from the steam engine to the search engine. 2 centuries of innovators. Walter Isaacson has this to say about They Made America with energy and brilliance. Sir Harold Evans brings to life America's business geniuses. It's a wonderful cast of famous and delightfully obscure innovators, like our friend that we just talked about, ranging from Thomas Edison to Ted Turner. There's a range. They Made America is so good that Evans deserves a place in it for the energy and innovation he has brought to the business of celebrating history and ideas. Well, there you go. Now you're an innovator. You certainly are an innovator in the sense we were talking about before, that you've given us a way to look at the history of this country, which other people have not yet done.
That's right.
We thank you for that.
Thank you.
So, the person that I want to talk with is, one of our San Francisco institutions, A.P. Giannini. And there's a fast way of looking at him, a visionary whose innovations in banking brought the state of California into a transformed state, and he also transformed the finances of the common person, so that he not only did great things in banking, he also did great things for the state of California.
Oh, the whole state of California. I like the thought, before Giannini started his little Bank of Italy, which grew into the Bank of America after many trials, the concept of banking was that you could lend money to the rich who didn't need it,
right,
but you couldn't lend money to the poor who did. And so he had this curious idea.
It's a great idea.
It is a great idea. And he saw that you could have collateral in character. So when a young couple come along about to have a baby, he said, I'm going to invest in that baby. Of course you can have $25 loan. He would lend small amounts of money, and then he pushed branch banking. But what's amazing about it is that in the Great Depression, he raises the bonds for the Golden Gate Bridge. He takes advantage of every Franklin Roosevelt opportunity for creating wealth in the country, for hire purchase, for cars, for electric and so on. And yet, just before that, he's framed and kicked out of his company.
The thing, though, that you could kick him like crazy, but you could not kick out of him his optimism and his belief in people, particularly a person willing to work.
His faith, this is a man who travels the Transcontinental Railway as a fetus in the womb of his mother in 1869.
Yes.
So he's kind of born to innovation, but he's also born to have faith in the popular people. No sooner as he landed and his father's murdered, he's an orphan, they have to sell fruit and vegetables on the wharf in San Francisco. He does all this with tremendous passion, and he knows what the people are. The goodness of the ordinary people. And he never sought to make himself rich. I love this phrase he has. He says, no man owns a fortune, it owns him. So he renounced wealth all his life, yet created vast wealth for the state of California.
He really did. And you mentioned his getting thrown out of the first bank he was associated with, the Columbus something bank, and I want to just read that little part.
Yes, please.
And he gets back at being thrown out. Now, the man who throws him out, or the chief guy at that bank that he got thrown out, was a man by the name of Fugazi. Okay. One morning, Fugazi discovered that a team of carpenters was turning the saloon next door into a rival bank that had stolen the key man from him, that the despised hothead Giannini was now his landlord, and that overnight this new landlord had tripled his rent.
I tell you,
watch out what you do to Mr. Giannini.
I know. It's a time when you feel like cheering raw capitalism.
Yeah.
Tooth and claw capitalism. But he was he was not a saint. I mean, he had many strong opinions and was kind of tough, but I was on his side throughout when I was writing about him. The San Francisco earthquake and fire, 2 or 3 days later, he set up a bank across a couple of barrels on the wharf, and he's putting money into the hands of steamboat captains. Go north. Bring back lumber. Rebuild San Francisco.
Yeah.
I mean, just think. That's the dynamism and energy of one man, which inspires a whole generation of people.
Right after that 2006 quake, there comes something called the bank panic of 1907. He survives that, and at the same time, he starts really pushing his idea of a state network of banks.
Yes.
And this is the amazing thing. Things are lousy, and he's expanding.
Yes.
People are threatening. He's, innovating something else.
I know, and I think actually it's just like Samuel Insull. Both of them in the Depression thought that the answer was to expand,
right,
and they were right.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. That's quite amazing. But he like Insull, has a really silly period at the end. And we're not even going to be able to go into it because we're running out of time. So I suggest get the book. Read about how they tried to take Giannini down and they were unsuccessful. The book, They Made America. The author, Sir Harold Evans. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.